Welcome to the Rhino Daily Podcast, the daily podcast for sharp entrepreneurs. You'll hear insights and ideas from the world's top entrepreneurs and thought leaders, designed to help you increase your profits and improve your lifestyle. Now here's your host, Steve Cypress.
Here is part 2.
Welcome back to the Rhino Daily Podcast, and once again we have ADHD for business expert Ezra DeWolfe. If you did not listen to yesterday's episode, whoa, did you miss some fantastic stuff. After you listen to this one, you absolutely must go back and listen to yesterday. But if you did listen to yesterday, I know that you're totally excited for what we're about to get out of Ezra today. Question I said yesterday that I wanted to ask at the today. I said at the end of yesterday's episode, I do want to find out. I know, Ezra, you have a plan. You have advice for what kind of opportunity, what types of opportunities the ADHD entrepreneur business owner should look for, what we should stay away from, because we have a tendency, to say yes to way too much stuff. How should we focus properly to look for the right kind of opportunities that'll fit us?
Yeah, sure. Particularly when we have an interest-based nervous system, we might feel that pull of the new, of novelty. And of course, maybe we've had that experience in life of jumping between thing to thing to thing. And, although it might feel good in the moment sometime, and I don't judge that. I think that can be a strategic move for some folks. But in the absence of doing it, it's helpful to know, like we might have particularly different needs when it comes to working in our zone of genius. We might discover we work really well in that zone of genius, and when we're outside of that zone of genius, everything is harder than it is. What I can share with you in working with hundreds of folks, there are some criteria that generally lead to better opportunities, better business opportunities with folks with ADHD. And if we ignore those, we might find ourselves back in that spot of where we are in a where we maybe the business opportunity is there, but we're not interested in it. I might share with you that if you offered that I could run the most profitable laundromat in the world, I think I would run it into the ground, probably in about 3 months, because I would be bored out of my mind. So here are the types of things that I often suggest that people consider when it comes to the type of business opportunity they're looking for. So the first thing is that they should be looking at, is this something that allows me to solve interesting problems? In other words, does the work itself, does it lend itself to always generating novelty? So it might be true that we are kind of wired that we kind of like novelty, we kind of like learning. And what we'd want to avoid is being in a spot where we don't have those opportunities for learning. But instead, what if we picked opportunities that were constantly changing? Like a great thing about entrepreneurs with ADHD is we might be wired to learn quickly. We can succeed when it comes to things that are like, for a lot of the folks I work with in the legal profession, I often suggest that they start looking at areas of law that are constantly evolving and changing so that it's giving them that need for stimulation. Because in the absence of that, we might feel that need to get that need for variety met from just changing opportunities when it might be better to stay. So that's certainly the first thing, is we want to look for businesses that have those particular types of interests built in. Another thing that we would want to do is I often suggest that we look at businesses that solve some sort of higher stakes problem. And the reason for that, I think you can be very profitable solving low stakes problems, low margin and high volume. You could be very profitable at a lower volume and a higher margin. But often when we're working in higher volume businesses, it often also gives us the ability to we actually have the margins to make the dent in the world that we want to make. We have the margins to hire people to help us out and making sure that we're more in our zone of genius. And we don't always have those same options. Even if it's profitable in the long run, without the margins, it can be tough to work in that zone of genius. There's nothing wrong with being a specialist, leaning into what makes us great, but often being able to do that, particularly as a solopreneur, requires higher margins. So just to summarize, one, make sure that it's an endless source of interesting problems for you to solve in the business. Two, we want to make sure that there's high margins. We're solving high stakes problems so that we can operate more in our zone of genius. The last two things I might suggest. One is we want to think not just of the opportunity, Maybe somebody's really interested in biotech, and that's wonderful. Maybe somebody's interested in AI, and that's wonderful. But if you map it out, like, what are the daily tasks? What are you actually going to be doing every day? Sort of work backwards from that. That can be a helpful sort of way to make sure that we're making the most of our time and not struggling and finding it to be a chore or an obligation. And then the last piece I would suggest is thinking about how we can leverage using some sort of a unique skill. It's very common that business owners with ADHD want to make some sort of dent in the world. And we kind of might have to lean into that. Yes, maybe it means turning down what might appear to be a more profitable opportunity, but if it doesn't allow you to make that dent in the world, it may not be something that you'll be able to sustain in the long run and might give you the sort of juice that you want. So those are when we're evaluating things, those are the criteria that I most commonly suggest that entrepreneurs take a look at.
Yeah, I can relate 100% because in my world of advertising, marketing, and sales, we always say that you're going to get bored of your marketing way before your prospects and your market does, because we are ADHD business owners and entrepreneurs. So we're going to say, oh, gee, I want to do something new, or I want to use a new platform, or, Instagram is working great, but let me try out TikTok, or let me try this thing or that thing or whatever. And so we have a tendency to, one of the easiest things I do as a marketing consultant, when I first talk to somebody, I ask them, well, how'd you get the clients you have now? And they tell me what they did, and I say, are you still doing that? Well, gee, no, I stopped it. Right, because we have ADHD, and we got bored of it, but it's still working. So this is really important to business owners, isn't it?
Yeah, it may be true that we have to meet particular needs, and it may be true that, we have certain things that are assets to us that other folks don't have, particularly the ability to, we tend to be very comfortable working in environments where the best practices change every 3 months. Not everyone is so comfortable. And if that's the case, then we might as well lean hard into those things to avoid that situation where we've inadvertently found ourselves trying to get those needs met by other ways, such as jumping around between different opportunities.
I love it. And you mentioned earlier about, variety. Like I remember from my Tony Robbins days, I was a Tony Robbins trainer for a little bit, and he's like, humans need variety, but they need consistency. And so we're pushed and pulled in the different direction, and if we don't get the variety we need from things changing in the business and, like you say, new problems to solve and important things to do, we're unfortunately might look for it elsewhere, like taking drugs and gambling and doing all kinds of stupid things. So is it true that I haven't thought about it before, but you would know, those of us with ADHD, don't we have more of a tendency to really be drawn to variety, which could be dangerous if we don't do it? And go to theadhdtools.com to get Ezra's 5-step game plan to transform your business.
Experiences. I could meet that peak experience by doing drugs. I could meet that peak experience by skydiving. I could meet that if I have a variety, if I have a need in business to be constantly learning, like it's designing that from the beginning, rather than trying to fight against it. I think the example you gave of what's worked well for you in your own business is very similar to a lot of business owners I work with ADHD who sort of feel that they've landed in the zone of genius. What we want to avoid doing is we want to avoid trying to making our need for variety met by, changing our offer every 2 months. And instead, maybe the way that you get your need for variety met is you working in a field like if you're thinking about marketing or advertising, how could you leverage that need into coming up with endless hooks? How could you get that variety of solving interesting problems by, working in a sphere where you're working with different types of business owners with different problems all the time? And it's the lack of awareness. Maybe lack of awareness isn't the right term, but it may be true that not everyone has that need. Some people would be quite fine having a very boring and profitable business, and we might feel some guilt that why can't I be like that? I sometimes might feel envious of people I think who've only had one good idea in their whole life and they stick with it because it's the only idea they've ever had, and they succeed through consistency. And if that may not be our path, we just want to it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong, but we need to lean in and search for those areas that are most likely to be in our zone of genius.
So I just noticed from the clock we're out of time today, but I want to touch on that tomorrow. Can we go into more detail about how we see ourselves, our self-talk, and how that affects what we're going to do and how successful we're going to be? Can we go into more detail on that tomorrow?
Yeah, you bet. Let's do it.
Now make sure to go to theadhdtools.com for Ezra's 5-step game plan to transforming your business.
That's the end of part 2. Join us next time for part 3.
Thank you for joining us today on the Rhino Daily Podcast, the daily podcast for sharp entrepreneurs hosted by Steve Cypress. Join us tomorrow for another exciting episode designed to help you increase your profits and improve your lifestyle. Also, go to rhinodaily.com for more great business exploding tips, strategies, and tactics from the world's top experts. Plus, snag your free copy of Money Making Monthly magazine.
Goodbye.